Hello, and welcome to part 3 of my night table project series. In this video, I'll be preparing the panels for assembly using joinery, which is a woodworking term for ways to put stuff together. But first, we need to discuss some groovy terms. In woodworking, we often use grooves in order to join things together. But there's different terms for a different type of groove, and I'm going to be using some in this process, so I wanted to explain them first. The first type of groove is called a dado, and this is what a dado looks like here. It's just basically, in this case, a very wide groove, about 3/4 inch wide, and it goes all the way from the front and the back. What I'm going to be using it for is to take my shelf and join it into the side, like this, right? So the advantage is I've got 3 surfaces, bottom here, and then the 2 sides. And this allows the glue to have a lot of surface to grab onto the shelf. So it's very strong. The second type is called a rabbet. Not that rabbet. This is a rabbet here. So the only difference between a rabbet and a dado is a rabbet is along the edge of the piece of wood. So I'm going to be using it in my project to join the side piece to the top. And again, I get a little bit of extra surface, as opposed to, say, if I just had a plain piece of wood and went like this, right? I've got some extra surface here along the edge for the side to grab. So it makes for a stronger joint. So pretty simple, dado and rabbet. So of course, I'm going to make things more complicated. With this dado, the thing is, you can see the dado from the front, right? You can see the channel. So I wanted to hide that just really so it looks nicer. So I'm going to use something called a stopped dado. And that's what this is. It goes all the way to the back, but it stops before it hits this edge. So when I put my shelf in this time, you can't see the joinery here. So that's called a stop dado. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, won't that be more work in terms of where to stop and how to line it up and how to make the shelf come nicely? Exactly. More chances for learning opportunities. So let me show you how this works out. So here are the completed stop dados in my right and left hand panels. To make them, I clamped 2 blocks to my router table fence. The one on the left side I used as a stopping point. I would run a panel across the router, and when I hit that block, I would simply stop. The other block, the right-hand one, I used as a starting point for the other panel. And that's what I'm doing now. I put the right-hand side against that start block, slowly lower the panel all the way down to the router table until it encounters the bit, which is already running. I now just slide the rest of the panel across to complete the dado. But I wanted to have the fronts of the dados square. So I do this by hand with a chisel, some patience, and a little trial and error. Here's the before and after of that operation. The next step is to cut the shelf to finished length. To do that, I use 2 small pieces of wood to represent the depth of the dados into which the shelf is going to fit. I simply line up the shelf with the outer edges of those pieces and then mark and cut to length. To make sure I have a nice smooth fit with the shelf, I sand the edges just a little bit more. Finally, with the shelf, I can notch the front edges so that it'll slide all the way forward and be flush with the rest of the cabinet. I mark using the same pieces I used to actually use the stop dados, and then with my handsaw I cut out the notches. I now do a dry fit of all the pieces to see how they fit together and to be able to fix any problems before applying any glue. The last step is to cut some thin strips to act as drawer supports or runners in the sides of the cabinet. And I do that with my super cool push stick. And I call it that because I can safely cut thin strips from a very wide board with one hand. With the strips cut, all that's left is to apply a little glue, position them correctly, more or less, and clamp them down. The completion of the joinery brings this part of the project to an end. In the next segment, I'll be joining up the panels to make, well, the table, and installing a couple drawers. I'll see you then for more woodworking in progress.